We are live. So, Courtney, tell us
Hey.
who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I am the host of Haunts podcast. It is a show that's dedicated to telling the audience or whoever might be listening the true stories behind the world's most haunting legends. So I like to say that I take a skeptical yet hopeful approach to any sort of paranormal story that I'm looking into. Um, that said, I do try to keep it objective. I don't want to debunk for the sake of debunking. Um, I would say, though, in terms of just who I am as a person, I've been a paranormal researcher now for, gosh, probably about 10 years, almost 10 years at this point. So the show in and of itself really focuses kind of on the, like I said, the true events, but also the theory kind of behind it, trying to explain why a haunting might be occurring versus just the events that are actually happening. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I've been doing it for about 2 years and I really have been enjoying it, but I also like coming on to other people's shows and getting to talk about ghost stories and just weird stuff that might be happening out in the world. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I just listened earlier today to your episode in New Orleans.
Yeah. Yeah. When you reached
It
out
was
to me,
pretty
to put me
cool.
on, it was like we had just finished recording that. I was out there for a friend's bachelorette weekend as well, but I went out a day early just to be able to stay at the Hotel St. Pierre because
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
heard about it.
Talk about a
And
target-rich environment.
yeah,
It's New Orleans is nuts when it comes to that stuff.
it really is, especially like, I mean, I've done a few different episodes on various different haunts in and around New Orleans. Um, like we got to go to the, what is it called? Um, Muriel's on Jackson Square, which is this like
Mhm.
little cute little restaurant. But upstairs there's a seance lounge. And that it was so spooky
We
and
just have a
so cool.
seance lounge and them hanging around,
Exactly.
you
The
know?
the owner of the original home, I think it was built well before the spiritualism movement, but one of the people who lived there when it was just a home was a huge practitioner in spiritualism. So she was constantly doing seances up there, and that's attributing to a lot of the hauntings, at least I think. So we
Wow.
got to go there, and then when we were checking into our hotel, the host that was kind of getting us all set was like, yeah, the craziest thing happened earlier. I got a noise complaint, called the guest that was staying there. No one was in the room, and that's like one of the number one um like reports in this hotel is hearing footsteps from rooms where no one's checked in or no one's
Yeah.
in there. Um, a little bit easy to debunk. We didn't have any specific, or at least I didn't hear anything in editing that led me to believe that there was any sort of evidence, but we had a good time in there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good
so
episode because it was
thank
also
you.
like that was her first time ever doing
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah. That was like her first time. My friend Jordan came with, and I threw her
Like
into the
freaking
deep
out.
end. Yeah. So she's never done anything very haunted at all. She and her husband are both very Catholic, which I love, but they, choose to walk in the light. And but she's always been very, very supportive of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
show and like wanting to learn more about it. So I felt a little bad taking her there because I'm at the airport and she's flying from a different location. So I text her, I'm like, hey, like they're letting us check in early. And we can upgrade our room if we want. And she's like, yeah, if you want to, that's totally fine. So I call the hotel and I'm like, hey, is there any way that I can get into this specific building? Because there's like 12 buildings on the property. And the most
Mhm.
haunted one is the Peru house. So I'm like, is there any way? I don't care if it's like a little dinky room with one bed or if it's a suite. I just want to stay in there. So they upgraded our room. They were really nice about it, but she had no idea until we checked. And I was like, by the way, we're staying in the one building where things are like, if something's going to happen, it's
The
going to
most
happen in
haunted
here.
building.
Sorry about it. She was a good sport, but afterwards she's like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. We ended up staying up until like 3 in the morning or something like that. And she's like, okay, now it's time for bed. I'm like, you choose 3 a.m.
Yeah,
to go to
3 a.m.
sleep.
of all time, right?
Right. And she's like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, I'll tell you in the morning because you're not
Yeah,
going to be able to
just
even
sleep.
relax in here.
Sleep.
Just go to bed.
Oh my
Like
God.
less than a minute later, I hear her snoring in her bed. And I'm like, great, I'm just gonna be alone in here, not able to sleep. I eventually got to sleep as well, but she was out like a light. So, I mean, I don't know, proud of her for that being the first time that she was just easily
Yeah.
able to relax and just call it a day. But
Right. It's
yeah,
pretty
so
crazy.
yeah, it was a fun experience. I'm glad to be able to get to do stuff like that. Because I mean, when you start a podcast or anything on the internet where you're creating, it's not like you have this expectation of what you want to do with it, but you really have no idea where you're going to go.
Right.
So the fact that I can even like this is the 2-year anniversary of the show. I'm staying at a haunted hotel. I have friends who are willing to record an episode with me. It was
Yeah.
just
And
the
recording on
craziest thing.
location, which is always cool.
Yeah, yeah, that was one thing that I knew I wanted to do when I first started haunts, but I didn't necessarily know how to go about doing it because I live in the middle of nowhere, Montana. There are a couple like little tiny haunted locations around here that like there are hotels that you can stay in. There's 2 of them specifically that are close to me that I'd like to go to, but also at the same time I feel like I might be triangulating to where I live.
Yeah.
Um Especially just like my house has some history to it that's like pretty well known in the town that I live. So
Yeah.
try to keep my cards close to my chest, but suffice it to say, it's cool to be able to travel to locations that aren't
Absolutely.
super close to home and get to tell their stories too, because it's just not something that it's something that I've always wanted to do, but never thought I'd actually be able to get to do. So
Gotcha.
thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Oh no, absolutely. So question that I
Mhm.
ask everyone that comes on the
Sure.
show is what is your gateway drug to this wonderful world of high strangeness
Mm,
that we like mine I explained earlier is Bigfoot.
mhm. Yeah.
But so what kind, because I had an experience when I was young, so it just
Ooh.
like thrust me into it, and I'm just like ever since I've been addicted.
Yeah.
That
See, the
that
thing
and like
is
mythology. So
yeah. I think the thing is about like, or at least it is a bit weird for me, is the fact that I don't really believe in cryptids or anything like that. I
yeah,
want
yeah,
to so badly, but I'm the
yeah,
kind of person who needs to like have an experience to be like,
of course.
okay, like this is kind of what, like this is something that I can't explain away. And I've never had one with a cryptid. So I definitely want to hear your story at some point. But as far as my like gateway drug or kind of what got me into this, I feel like I have a few because it was slow going. Um, I should say, just as like an overarching personality trait, I've always just been interested in horror content. I think I started watching like horror movies and stuff like that when like way too young, like 8, 9 years old
Yeah,
maybe.
right,
Like,
right.
and the thing is
Just
my
stay,
dad showing them to
getting
me.
scared and just being like your parents are like go to bed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
literally. Like, well, that's my mom. She's very much like I don't want to have any part of this.
yeah,
To the point, but like she's also like can relax. My dad's like, oh, I definitely believe in it, but it scares the ever living daylights out of me. And he was the one who was kind of like, oh, let's like watch, The Shining together or American Psycho or stuff like that, where it's like, Dad, like this is intense for an 8-year-old, but also I love it. So I
yeah,
think
yeah,
just like
right.
growing up in an environment with somebody else who liked horror content really just helped open me up to things that were spooky. I remember one time when I was really, not really, really young, probably 10-ish, middle school, somewhere in there. I went camping with my dad and brother, my best friend, her brother, and her dad. And we're sitting around the campfire, basic
As
as
you
it
do.
seems. Yes, you do. And her dad starts telling a ghost story about her like my friend's uncle who passed away before I can't remember if it was before she was born or when she was a really really like young kid, but he had this like toy car, like one of those, it literally looked antique, and
Right.
she inherited it, so it's in her childhood bedroom. And one night they're like, he's, saying goodnight to her and they see it moving around. And she and her dad are also both very spooky people. But I just remember thinking like this is so fun to be able to just talk about. I didn't want the conversation to end. And
Yeah.
kind of after that point, it was like a slow revelation where anytime ghost stories came up or the topic of the paranormal came up, I was sat like so focused, so ready to talk about it. And then the first time that I probably had a paranormal experience was at the Bell Witch Cave, which is the story that I was kind of saving for you.
Oh yeah.
And that truly, I just think changed me in a way that this isn't even like the first experience. It's just the one that's still ongoing, if that makes sense. But it all kind of came to be around the same time. So we'll just get into it, I guess.
Yeah, get
um,
after it.
I was,
I write, I take a lot of notes, so don't,
oh, cool.
I'm
No, I
paying
appreciate it.
attention. So,
No, I got you. I appreciate it. So to preface this whole story, I started getting very much like into paranormal research, I would say as a hobby, like my freshman year of college. So I've always been like pretty, interested in it. Started researching at a more serious level around 18 years old. So just looking into ghost stories, I'm not posting them anywhere. I'm not writing about them. I'm just interested to kind of see what I can find. And it invited some strange activity in the first apartment that my husband and I, back when we were dating, first moved into. And that's a whole story in and of itself. But suffice it to say, we had some poltergeist activity occurring around the time that we moved from one apartment to the next. Things sort of settled down. And then the next time we moved, it happened again. So it seems like every time we move, we have this sort of just strange, I can't even like describe it other than poltergeist activity. Things will move on their own, and not to the point where it's like aggressive, like Hollywood level paranormal activity, but things where it's just like that can't be anything other than a ghost. Like I have no other explanation for. Like one time, right around the time that we were moving out of our second apartment together, I had I have an espresso coffee maker, and it literally made me a cup of coffee while I was in the shower. Like I don't have any,
nice.
which was like
At least
sweet.
at least it's kind.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, I didn't end up drinking it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, I have
No,
no idea
I
what's in
understand.
this. But I guess I appreciate the sentiment. But it's stuff like that where we'll see things or we'll hear things or things just move about on their own. And it's
So
always around
let me
the time
ask
that
you
we're
though,
moving.
do you
Okay.
think something's attached to you or him?
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
do.
for sure. Have
For
you
sure.
ever tried to get rid of it or no?
I haven't really. Okay. I think that there might be multiple things attached to us. Before going on this trip where we went to the Bell Witch Cave, it was just one spirit, and I believe it's a man named John Pugh.
Okay.
And I dive into this more on the show. It's I think our 1-year anniversary episode. I talk about the ghost of Mr. Pugh, and kind of my research into his family and the story that surrounds him. So I won't dive too far into it because honestly,
But you do have an episode about it,
I
right?
do. Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
can't remember the episode number, but I can
Make
send it
sure
to you.
you guys check it out.
Thanks, guys. No, but yeah. So I have never wanted that spirit to go anywhere because it seems relatively friendly. Then there's a spirit, I think, and honestly, this one may have moved on, because I haven't felt or whatever or encountered it in quite some time. But a woman in my town was murdered, and she used to own this house, and that's all I'm going to say about it because I want to be
Okay.
respectful of her
Yeah.
family and stuff. It's unsolved, but I do believe she was here at some point. I don't think she is anymore. And I did try to get her to move on because I think she needed like closure or wasn't even aware.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. This other spirit I have tried to get rid of, have not been successful. And I think it's some flavor of the Bell Witch. And I know that's quite the claim. So let me explain
Okay.
in a bit more detail, and you and I can maybe try to debunk it together. I don't know. So with the context of any time that we move, something strange happens in terms of what I believe to be paranormal activity. Right around the time that I graduated college, my husband and I decided I don't want to live in Metro Atlanta anymore. thought about moving further north because we were right in like kind of the foothill towns at the time that we decided to move further west, in the foothill towns of like the Appalachian Trail. Like we were,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
a 20-minute drive from the trailhead to get on there. So as you can imagine, there was some strange stuff just in that area. The county that we lived in, interestingly enough, was like the number one sightings of Bigfoot in the state of Georgia, which isn't saying much because it's Georgia, but it's
Yeah,
still
but
kind of a flex.
still, yeah.
So we decided, hey, we definitely don't want to live in this state. Thought about Colorado, thought about Montana, thought about moving further into the Appalachians, but we're like, we really love the idea of moving to a small mountain town in Montana. Let's go on a cross-country road trip, celebrate my recent college graduation, and just see if it's something that we would like to move to, because we'd never been out here before. At the time, we specifically wanted to move to Billings, which I'm so glad we didn't, because that's more of a
Yeah.
city. You
Oh
know.
yeah. Yeah, I do.
You
I
know
do.
about it. So we plot our trek, and the way that we were going is we were driving north through Tennessee. We were going to stop and have dinner with, or it was more of like a lunch with his grandparents in Kentucky, then start going west. And then we drive through Billings, Southwest Montana, up to Glacier National Park, and then come back, kind of going across the northern states of the United States, just to give you the concept. So obviously day one of this trip, hour 3 of this trip, we're in Tennessee. And me being me, I
Eastern
want
Tennessee
to,
of all places too, right?
yeah,
So
exactly. Me being me, I want to make this like a paranormal tour of the United States. So every hotel that we had booked was haunted. Every
right.
stop along the way was going to be haunted. Mainly because at this point, I'm like fully a believer, to the point where it's like a fault. My husband, on the other hand, is still, but like at the time was a very staunch skeptic. Now he's sort of come over to believing in some things, mainly because of this experience that we've had. But at the time, he's like, no, I don't believe in any of it. Like borderline, like atheist, like, so it's also my personal mission at this point to prove him wrong.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, I had just started really like within the last like year and a half, 2 years, really getting into paranormal research and taking it seriously. Because when I was 18, 19 years old, it was more of a hobby. But in my like earlier 20s, I'm like, let's see if I can make a go of this in a professional setting.
Right.
So I'm not well versed in what I'm doing, if that makes sense. Like I'm not very skilled in comparison to where I'm at now, 10 years into it. So I was dumb to be like so for real with you. Like the way that I went about all of this was incredibly irresponsible, and in hindsight I wish I hadn't done this. So take this as a cautionary tale if you're just now getting into this field. Things can go wrong and like crap can hit the fan pretty quickly. So just be forewarned. So we're driving through Eastern Tennessee, like we said, approaching Adams, Tennessee, which is where the Bell Witch Cave is.
Right. Which
Have you
is
talked about
more
it?
of like central. It's like north central.
Is it? Yeah. Where
Yeah,
are we?
and it's right on the Kentucky border. It's
Yeah,
well, it's
it's like
close. Bellwitch Cafe. Oh my God, the Bellwitch Cafe. That's what
that
I
would be
almost said.
quite the place.
Right, wouldn't it?
Quite the place
But
to get a cup
Bellwitch
of
Cave,
coffee.
the Bellwitch Cave is it's not that far from like well, I
Hmm.
mean it's out in the middle of nowhere actually, but it's yeah, it's like north central
Yeah.
because it's north of northwest of Nashville, right?
Oh,
I'm pretty
okay.
sure it
It's
is.
something like that. I know that because we stopped in Paducah for that like
Paducah. So
late lunch situation. It wasn't
yeah,
that far from it.
no. So I used to go to Paducah to Kentucky Lakes as a kid.
Oh, cool.
I
Okay.
grew up in Illinois, and
Oh,
so
so
we
not
used
far
to
at
go
all.
down there. So it's crazy down there. But anyway,
Anyways, yeah.
but yeah. So you're kind of in between, like it's almost like a triangle actually, and this is what's one of those things that um kind of gets how stuff gets tricky between um land of the lakes
Yeah.
Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, which is up in
Uh-huh.
Kentucky. You have Mammoth Cave National Park over here.
Uh-huh.
And then you've got the Bell Witch Cave is like right
Right.
between
Oh,
those. And so it creates like this triangle.
give me like
Just
2
saying.
seconds. My dog wants out of here, I guess. Ah,
So
sorry about that.
just saying, that's kind of where it's at. And it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So here, I just pulled it up. Yeah. It's northwest of Nashville. So
Yeah, that
either way.
sounds right. Because
Yep.
we left Nashville, to
Yep.
make a long story even longer. We left Nashville and we're in between Adams, Tennessee and Nashville,
Yep.
driving to this place. And I told Todd, I'm like, I want to, like, we should go and stop and see this. And while we're going there, I'm playing a podcast. I think, I forget which one it was, but one of the paranormal podcasts is talking about specifically the Bell Witch Cave. And there's this curse allegedly where if you take something from the property, you will be cursed by the Bell Witch.
Right.
Again, I have no base, or I mean, I do have some sort of basis. I knew what I was doing is wrong. I did it anyways. We go to the cave. We're taking our tour, and I pick up a rock because again, I want to prove to my husband that this is like real stuff. And I think 2 years into doing this,
Yeah.
I have the wherewithal to be able to get rid of whatever it is that might follow in the event that anything follows. Newsflash, I
The
don't.
hitchhiker, right?
Yeah, newsflash. At the time I didn't. I still don't 10 years later. I still don't know how to get rid of whatever it is that this entity is. But we leave the Bell Witch Cave after taking our little tour, which, to be so for real, it's kind of a tourist trap, but also at the same time, if you can go, don't do the like tour of the house because it's a model of the house. The original house is still existing, but it's still on the family's property, right? So they remade the house, and it's like creepy. Like, you get to hear the story and then you can go into the cave, but we, like I said, just finished listening to a podcast episode about it and would have saved a lot of time if we, anyways, suffice it to say, we just do the cave tour and don't take anything from it. But we finish our tour, we get back in the car, we're driving to Paducah, have a lovely lunch with his family. And then it's my turn for the first time in this trip to drive the behemoth land yacht that my father-in-law owns. So like that was nerve-wracking in and of itself because this is a massive car. I drive a Toyota Camry, or I did at the time, so it was quite the adjustment.
Yeah.
And almost instantly, out of nowhere, and like this happens in the South, so like take this with a grain of salt, but out of nowhere, storm clouds roll in. And it's like to the point where I'm like, if you've driven in a southern torrential downpour, you'll understand kind of how nerve-wracking this is. But we're going across this like little bridge. It's like a suspension bridge, but there's no room for any air at all.
Yeah.
Visibility's low because it's like downpouring. And we get off of the bridge and we're, in me and my mid panic of trying to drive on this with a semi coming towards me in the rain. We get off, we're by a river. I don't know what it is, but I think at this point we're in Missouri, maybe, if my geography is right.
Probably would have been the Ohio River.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Probably. But we get off and then, not out of nowhere, but pretty randomly, it feels like lightning strikes. And I don't think it hit our car, but the force of it shook our car to the point where I felt like energy in the small of my back. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it was jarring. And at that point, I'm like, that was the most like bizarre thing I've ever experienced. I'm not saying it was paranormal activity at that point in time, but this does come back up. I was just taken aback because I've never been that close to lightning striking. I don't think it hit the car. At one point when I was younger, I did. And then I realized that's highly illogical. But, it was to the point where it was very, very close to the point where it shook our car and I felt some sort of a charge in my body.
Of course, yeah.
So then we keep driving and this thick fog rolls in, which kind of makes sense in terms of like the weather. It stops raining, thick fog rolls in. I'm not thinking too much of that other than the fact that I have no idea where I am. And we end up getting lost on our way to the next hotel, which by my estimate should have put us there. Like we would have gotten there late, but not as late as we did. Like it was to the point, I think we ended up checking into this like random hotel in Podunk, like Missouri or wherever we were staying. I can't remember now. And it was like 3 a.m. And I want to say that I had plotted it out to be another like 5 hours. So it should have been like 10, 11 o'clock when we got there. So we got lost to the point of like pushing us back several hours.
Wow.
So that was strange. But again, we can attribute that to just not knowing where we are and poor visibility, whatever.
Yeah, right.
The rest of our trip is relatively normal until we get to Billings, which bear in mind, this is the place that like my husband and I were thinking like, if we move here, this is possibly where we're going to want to go. Glad we didn't. And one of the reasons why is because as we were checking in to where we were staying, it was an Airbnb, not a hotel. So this isn't one of the haunted locations that we stayed at.
Right.
It was just a normal Airbnb on a downtown strip in Billings, Montana. We both get violently ill for the entirety. Like, I know it's kind of gross, but for the entirety of our stay, like I've never been more sick in my entire life.
Wow.
To the point where like we couldn't even go out and like explore any of the city, which was the whole point of us going out there, is to see if this is a place where we want to live.
Right.
And it put such a bad taste in our mouth that we were like, this isn't for us, even though that's not really fair to Billings because it obviously it wasn't its fault.
Right.
But we were so sick that it just was like, I don't even want to be here anymore. We only stayed in that town for 2 days. And by the time, like, as we were driving away from this town, we were sick the entire time. Even leaving our Airbnb, we were still not feeling well. Wow. But it seemed like the further and further that we got away from Billings, the better we felt.
Huh.
So it's like we were being, I hate to say pushed away from it, but it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I feel better. But it seems to be getting better the farther and farther we're getting away from this town, which is
bizarre.
Which is odd given that like this is where we would like to live, you know? But again, I'm still not thinking very much of it. And I don't think much of it until years later after we've made the move to Montana, but more on that a little later. We go and do the rest of our trip. So we go up to Glacier National Park and do the whole like hiking touristy thing.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's a really like it's a super cool like still I feel like it feels like a different planet up there and I love going to visit, but we're coming back down after we like stay our couple of days in Glacier National Park. We leave that area and we're driving back down on I-90, which is like the major interstate through Montana, as you probably know. But we get to a certain like point in our drive and we're like, you know, I'm getting a little bit hungry. Definitely don't want to stop in Billings because we just have an aversion to it at this point. Yeah. So we come across these like exit signs outside of Bozeman. And we're like, we might as well just stop here because this might be one of the only places that has food, like fast food sort of stuff between here and Billings. The rest of it's going to be like ranch access stuff. Billings is another several hours away. And then after that, we might as well just wait until Rapid City, which is where we were staying that night. So we get off and we're going down this like little circle exit. If you know what I'm talking about, like those little roundabout things. Absolutely. And as we're like driving through, we see a grocery store. There's a McDonald's, which is where I want to eat lunch. A couple gas stations and like a pizza restaurant across the street from the McDonald's. And my husband's like, I'm just going to go eat at the pizza place because I really don't want McDonald's after what happened to me in Billings. I would just rather eat something that isn't that because he doesn't like it anyways.
Yeah, right.
So he's like, will you buy me a Coke though so I can, you know, at least have that to maybe settle my stomach because he's still kind of a little queasy. So we're separated. Our car's parked in the gas station parking lot because that's like the in-between.
Yeah.
And he's going back walking back from the pizza place when I'm standing inside. All of a sudden, like lightning strikes outside of the McDonald's to the point where everything in the shopping complex, all of the power goes out. And The thing is with Montana is like we're high desert. We don't get a lot of precip in the
Yeah, right.
summertime. We don't.
You get
Um,
snow, you just don't get
we don't,
summertime precipitation. Yeah.
yeah, which is unfortunate for the wildfires, but suffice it to say, most of the people that were in this McDonald's were relatively shocked. It was to the point where like they couldn't even ring us up for our food. They were just,
Oh,
you already
wow.
placed your order, whatever, just take it. Like, we'll eat the $3 that this burger costs or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, right.
So as I'm waiting, because I'd already placed the order and I'm waiting for them to, get the food out to us, my husband comes running in and he looks white as a ghost. And I'm like, what just happened to you? Like, because I'm like, you were obviously outside when the
Right,
lightning struck. And he was like,
right.
I swear to God, it came within like 10 feet of me. To the point. So again, he's not struck by lightning, but he's,
But he can feel it, everything.
yeah, like the same sensation. Like you can feel it kind of in
Plus,
your
there's
back.
like a
Yeah.
concussion and everything as well. So yeah.
Yeah. It was a bizarre like experience. And at that point, like he's like, okay, we're taking the rock back. Too many weird things have
Right.
happened.
Taking this rock right
For
back.
me, like I'm like, you don't even like believe in it. And I'm kind of like smug because I'm like, you don't, this was my whole plan. And he's like, I almost just died in the parking lot
Totally
of
setting
this
you up for failure.
McDonald's. So
Totally setting you up for failure.
right.
And
So
I didn't know he was gonna try and kill us, but
I mean,
oh my
like,
gosh.
I didn't know he was going to try to kill us. He like the Bell Witch did though allegedly kill John Bell, but it's a whole that's a whole other
right.
thing, whatever. So we drive back. The rest of it is pretty uneventful. We get back to the Bell Witch cave, leave the rock, apologize,
So
go about our
sorry.
lives.
Right.
I mean, it's fine. Go about our lives for a couple of years. And again, I did this to myself. So like I'm saying this in jest because like, I made my bed, now I'm going to lay in it. A couple years go by, we end up actually moving to Montana, but we don't go to Billings because number one, we didn't really get to see it.
Right.
Number two, we have an aversion to that. Like I still won't stop there.
You're still sick. You just have those memories. It's tainted, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so we didn't choose to go there. And then also my husband got a job in Gallatin County. So we moved to it's a little town called Belgrade. Okay. And if you know anything about like the Bozeman area, it's a very congested suburb of Bozeman. If Montana can get congested.
Yeah, but I do. I know what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, we were living in a townhouse and we now live on 14 acres. Obviously, we like the more rural side of this state. Yeah. So probably about like 6 months into our lease, we're like, maybe like we should look into buying property somewhere that isn't in a city. Like maybe we should look to see like moving to somewhere where we can consider like our forever home, whatnot. So we contact a realtor and we're like, these are our requirements. We want acreage, at least 10 acres. We don't want to live in Gallatin County if we can avoid it because it's too expensive.
Yep. It's insane.
Yeah. And it's beautiful over there. I get it, but it's so expensive and it's growing quite rapidly.
I'd rather be up towards the mountains.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is I mean, Bozeman and Gallatin County, they are very much a mountain town. Like that is a mountain area.
It is, but you're not in the mountains.
No, I mean, you're not.
You're down in a hollow or valley or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very, again, it's a very congested area, as pretty as it is. It's just not for me.
And it's getting worse. Well, COVID it just made it blow up.
Yeah. Well, that was,
and now you can't even find housing. There's people living in RVs all over the place, and now they've got the ordinance, that town ordinance that allows people to park their RVs on the side of the street.
They've actually done away with that.
Have they now?
Mm-hmm.
Last time I was out there, they were still just RVs everywhere.
Yeah, and it was horrible. And I mean, as a quick aside here, and we'll get back to the story, but my concern with it was people were being displaced from their homes because, property values are going up. And I mean, even the house that we were renting was sold out from under the people who sublet the lease from us because they were trying to get a quick bang for their buck, which was devastating. And, that happens all the time out here. And so
Yeah.
people
Well,
who
and
live
the
here
show
for,
didn't help either.
yeah. And I mean, it's been like, I feel bad about it because it's like these people are getting displaced from homes that they've been in for like a really long time. And then they're in these RVs and it's like negative like 30 degrees
Oh,
some
yeah.
nights. So it
Yeah.
can't be warm. So they have done away with it. I'm not really sure what became of the people who were staying around the Bozeman area in trailers. Hopefully they've got their situation figured
Yeah.
out. But it
Last
was a
time I was out
real
there was about a
problem for a
year
while.
ago. It's about a year ago.
Yeah.
So
They started in like the last 6 months
okay.
really cracking down on it because it can be quite dangerous. And there was also like a lot of crime
And
associated with it.
maybe it's because of weather as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, it's
I mean,
insane.
like I said, it's like negative 30 degrees some nights. Even like this last week, it's been frigid.
Oh yeah.
But to get back to the story, we contact a realtor and we're like, hey, these are kind of our requirements. And she goes, there's one place that I think you guys might like. And to be so for real with you, it's like the only thing that meets those requirements. So it's this or like you're going to be waiting a while.
Right.
Mainly again because of how like the property values in the state at the time were just starting to skyrocket. So we
Yeah.
really were like, we
So
need
you
to
guys
buy
got
something.
lucky.
We really did, but it, at least in my opinion, sort of came at a price. I wouldn't trade any of this, but it's just there's one thing where it's like, this all makes sense now. Like this is coming full circle. So we meet her in her downtown office in the town that I live in now. And we take one exit off of the interstate that the more direct way to get to her office. And then she's going to take us to this house. So we get in her truck and we're driving out to the property. And as we're driving from town, outside of town, because I live not in town, things are starting to become more familiar. So we see a little loop-de-loop exit off of the interstate. We see a gas station and a grocery store and a McDonald's and a pizza joint across the street from it. We're like, oh my God, this is where you were almost struck by lightning for the second time in a 4-day period.
Yeah, yeah.
What is or not, probably closer to a 5-day period or whatever, but what are the odds of that? So essentially we ended up buying the house because there was nowhere else for us to be able to go, really. Like we knew we needed to buy something and this seemed to be the only rational option within our price range, unless we wanted to give up on some stuff, which I guess we could have, but obviously we didn't.
Right.
So all in all, we were like, I think that the Bell Witch predicted, not really even predicted, but was telling us, I am always going to know where you are. Like this will make sense in 3 years when you move out here. I will always know where you are.
Right.
And then the activity in this house has been insane. I don't know how much you know about that story, but allegedly this spirit comes back in 7-year intervals to torment the Bell family as well as the people who it's cursed.
Wow.
Right? From my understanding of it. And when I did the math, I want to say, what year was that? Like 2022? No, 2023 was the 7th year in that cycle. The first 7th year in the cycle since I took a rock from that location. And that year was easily like the most difficult year of my life. Our house caught fire 3 separate times.
What the?
Yeah.
Wow.
And like things were happening in threes.
Yeah.
There were like instances of like, let's just say matters of life and death that came up in like 3 different occasions, to the point where we're like, something is like happening. So like on one occasion we had our chimney catch fire. And then on 2 separate occasions I had like our like stovetop catch fire, which again, it's an older house and maybe like I needed to clean it or whatever to give benefit of the doubt. But on one occasion, I literally had a pot of boiling water catch fire, like the inside of the pot.
Yeah, that's weird.
Which
it shouldn't happen.
Shouldn't be like physically possible.
Right.
And then I've seen shadows in our like more out of the corner of my eye, but only during this year, like this year interval. So seen shadows out of the corner of my eye to the point where I'm like, that's interesting. And then when I'm telling this story on the podcast, because again, I've shared the story on my own podcast as well, I'm listening or I'm speaking and talking about the paranormal activity that's going on in my home. And in doing that, I hear, and I caught it on audio, someone or something crunching in the snow outside of like my recording space.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was like maybe about 6 inches to a foot of snow on the ground. So I rip my headphones off and look, and there's nobody out there. As there shouldn't be. I live on 14 acres on the
Yeah.
side of a mountain. So there really shouldn't be anyone on the property. There were no footprints, no animals, nothing. And it was a man's gate, like an adult person's gate,
Yeah.
walking through the snow. And you can hear it on audio. I ended up taking the music out
Oh,
to like
that's
really be
cool.
like, you can hear it. It's the Halloween episode from my like first year doing it. So if you want to go check that out, another shameless plug, sorry about it.
Get
but
after it.
but I just, after that year, things started to calm down. So like 2024 and 2025 thus far have not been huge in terms of paranormal activity. But that 1 year interval, like we had livestock die in threes, 3 fires,
Yeah.
3 other that I don't really want to get into, but 3 matters of life and death occurring as well. And it was just like any time that I could be faced with some sort of
So was
hardship,
it,
it
but
occurred.
was it 3 sets of threes?
Yeah, it was always sets of threes,
But
which
so you
is,
had threes, but then it was 3 separate incidents of
oh,
three.
that has never occurred to me, but yeah.
So that's the pattern, right?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, to me,
So
that's always mocked the
but
Trinity.
9 total,
9 total occurrences, but
but
3
3
sets of
sets of
threes.
3. Yeah.
Yeah, so it started with the livestock, then the fires, then, or no, I guess the livestock and the fires happened very in rapid succession to one another. The other events that occurred that were a bit more tragic and upsetting, they happened
Yeah.
like 3 throughout the year,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense. So, and now it just seems like I still just have that one spirit that like makes me coffee and turns on the lights sometimes, and he seems cool, and I don't feel like he needs to leave. And honestly, I'm happy that he followed us from Georgia, because I didn't think he was going to make it out here with that
Right.
move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me, it almost feels like maybe not one of us, but maybe one of our objects could be like haunted by this spirit.
Maybe. I
So
mean, it literally could be anything.
yeah.
You don't know what they can attach to, or what they do attach to, or whether
Mhm.
it's you or it's an inanimate object. Yeah.
It's hard to say. And I really do think too, especially that spirit, the spirit of Mr. Pugh, as I call him, he has history associated with my husband's childhood home. So if
Okay.
it's like associated with a person, it
Yeah.
would, at least in my mind, have to be his. Like it has to be him. Or if it's an object, it's got to be something from his childhood that we've, like a keepsake that we've brought
Yeah. Right.
with us. So yeah, that's my, I guess, long-winded answer to your question. That was my gateway story into being like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't ignore this anymore. This is the most horrific yet fascinating thing I've ever encountered. So,
Yeah. No, I got you.
and it's brought me a lot of good content, but also a lot of stress and anxiety. So, as
Yeah.
a cautionary tale, if you think you can deal with it, no, you can't. Don't
Yeah.
take haunted objects from haunted places, because you
Right.
will.
Especially when you're warned not to. Like, it'd be
Right.
one thing if it was like, I'm gonna take a rock, but nobody
Mhm.
told me not to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Like you come across something Blair Witch style and you have no idea like what it is,
right.
right? You're just like out in the woods and you're like,
Yes.
oh, like this is a really beautiful, like abandoned kind of stone structure. I'm gonna
Right.
take a rock from, just as like a memento of the
Yeah.
occasion.
So
We
like I have like this cool so where I live in upstate New York.
Mhm.
Well, if you go way upstate, like Vermont,
Oh, how
like
cool.
Lake Champlain. So you're
Mhm.
like on Lake Champlain on the New York side.
Mhm.
There's this old fort um that was like a Civil War fort.
Okay.
Not a Revolutionary War fort, but it was a Civil War fort. Um back right on the water, right?
Mhm.
And I have a bunch of, and it's reported to be haunted as well.
Sure. Sure.
But I have some rocks from there, right?
Ooh, okay.
No issues, none.
None.
0 issues. But I took them and like they're cool. I've kind of got them set aside because I want to like do like shadow boxes for my kids or whatever. You know, that's what I'm talking about. But when something when somebody's like, yeah, we've had incidents where people have, you know, had
Well, it's like
stuff happen.
it's like if you're going to like Key West and you go see Robert the Doll and you knowingly
Oh
take a
yeah.
picture of him without asking.
Well, it's like, what's that? What are those boys' names? Those kids on YouTube.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. He
Sam
got
and
cancer.
Sam and
Which is, sorry, that was like a really like nasty way to go about it. Something
Yeah,
like, yeah.
no, he did get cancer.
But didn't
Sam
they
and
like
Cody, I think.
I don't think that's his name.
Sam and something.
Sam and something. Which is awful because I think that's the one that got here.
No, it's
Sam
the
and
other
Colby.
one. Sam and Colby. So Colby's the one that got sick.
Yeah, and it was like right after they had gone to that, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, within that year, yeah.
It's,
And
like that's the thing, it's terrifying. And that's one of the things he's
got
known to do.
He's got like traumatic, he's got like PTSD from that whole thing. Colby does. So
I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
My daughter, my youngest daughter's like obsessed with that, like them,
Stop,
like
that's
their
so cool.
shows. So
yeah,
her and I watch it all the time.
yeah.
And
It's a
like
nice
they
little
did that
bonding
really,
experience.
it is, and they did like that cool. You know, they've done a lot, and they did the Conjuring House, a couple different places, right?
Right.
But one of the last shows that they've just done, they went and saw like the trifecta of crazy. Annabelle, Robert the doll, and then some other doll.
Uh-huh.
And they went and visited all 3 of them. And then Sam got, again, here we go. We're talking about rocks from Bell Witch. You're not supposed to take pictures of
like
these.
Always does that though, I feel like. Anytime I've watched some of his videos, like some of their videos, he's pushing the envelope, which
always pushes
I
the
have
envelope.
respect for it to some degree, because obviously I do it too.
Yeah.
But that's wild to do at with those dolls.
With those dolls. So he took pictures of all 3 Polaroids, brought them all together at the last stop. You got to watch it.
Okay. Send me the video. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's super crazy. And they have like I've never seen them argue. And they both get visibly upset with each other, and it's intense. So
okay, I'll check it out. I mean, like, especially if you're revisiting that, did Colby know that he was taking those pictures?
No. And that's the kicker. So
okay.
He gets pissed.
Okay.
Because he's also, you can see that there's a point when he's like, there's one point where he is in front of Robert, the doll, and he's like heartfelt apologizing to the doll. Because he,
I'm sure he was like, that's a traumatizing experience. And like, again, it could be coincidence. And like, honestly, I'm happy that he's like, seems to be recovering.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I feel like for a while there are a lot of like big like YouTube creators we're all getting like some sort of terminal thing. So I'm really glad that it's not like with all the testing that we've done, he seems to be doing better. But I can only imagine like how traumatizing that must be to like face that again after the fact. And it could again all be coincidence.
Of course.
But there's a part of me that's like, was it? Was it? Like this is a huge coincidence. If
but it's like those things, like you have to. It's just kind of a cautionary tale that as ridiculous as you think it may be,
right?
These things, these entities, these powers, this stuff exists. Like I'm not going to go into it because I know my audience is really sick of hearing about it, but I've had what I would say is an incident with, incident's not the right word, but a couple run-ins with an entity that I would say is Lilith.
No way. Oh my God. Okay, I'm
So
interested. I know that you've already talked about it. Maybe we can have you on my
it's
show and you
ad
can tell me
nau
that
yeah,
story.
and it's ad nauseum. But again, it involves owls and
Yeah.
rebuking and calling on Jesus and all. I mean,
Whoa.
it's pretty intense. So
Yeah.
that's one of my experiences. And so I know what you're saying is that, yeah, all they did was take a rock,
Hmm.
but all this stuff happened that
And
just
it's
doesn't.
still, yeah, and it
And,
still
and it's
seems
like,
to be ongoing.
I think we innately know
Hmm.
when weird things are happening, right?
Yeah.
And we
And bear
are
in
at,
mind, sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was, it was more of, just bear in mind with this. I had all of these like weird incidents in 2020, whatever. I think it was 2023 that all of this was going on, which is another three, just to throw that
Another
back out
three.
there.
Yeah.
So
Saying.
we, about halfway through that year, I did the math because I'm like, what is happening? And like, is this, because it's always bothered me that I bought a house off of the same exit where my husband was almost struck by lightning for the second time.
Right.
It's just always freaked me out, giving me the willies, like, and
Yeah.
rightfully so, I feel
No,
like.
absolutely.
So it's not like I did the math ahead of time and was like, oh, this year's going to be nuts because it's the 7th year in the cycle. Half of the incidents had already occurred at the point that I decided to figure out when
Yeah.
exactly
Right.
the Bell Witch was going to return. And then presumably, what would 7 years after that point be?
Yeah. So what
Like, you
would
know what I
7 years
mean?
be? So
Is it 2030?
2023. So that would be 2030.
Right?
Oh, maybe we'll have to do some
I'll keep you
some
updated.
getting ready work. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
know.
So, I mean,
Saying
and like at that point, maybe I'm creating a fallacy in like the sense of, or a
maybe,
self-fulfilling prophecy, but who
but
knows?
maybe not. I mean, at the end of the day, what is life all about? I mean,
Yeah.
I think what I was going to say is at the end of the day, we're spiritual beings at the
Hmm.
core, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can believe that, you can't, it's up to you. But at the end of the day, there's something else going on with us
Hmm.
that is beyond this meat suit,
Right.
right?
We're having, what is that saying? We're spiritual beings having a physical experience or something
Right.
like that.
Absolutely. So because there's just too much evidence that says otherwise, right?
Right.
Near death experiences, astral projection. I mean, you just name it. That there's so
Right.
many things. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff out there. I think what this whole podcast has really shown me, and I know that you've been doing this for a while too, we don't know anything. We don't know
Yeah,
shit about shit. And
exactly.
at the end of the day, as soon as we start, we just have to be open to it, and we have to be safe, and we have to be
Hmm.
um careful, right?
Right. And I
And
mean,
have some armor on, when you go into some of these situations,
exactly. That's
you
kind of
know.
what I was saying to the friend who came with me to Hotel St. Pierre. She asks at some point in that episode, like, what do you do to prepare yourself when you're coming in to these locations? And I'm explaining to her the concept of a spiritual ego, where you, and again, this term has changed quite a bit with like the rise of like metaphysics. And I said this in the episode, but I really do feel like we're in a second wave of spiritualism just with the
Oh yeah,
overall interest in this.
there's a semblance of a great awakening ish
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
deal. Yeah, yes.
So in a nutshell, or at least when I first started doing this, the concept of a spiritual ego is your ego can be high or low regardless of what medium you're speaking about. So when you have a high spiritual ego, you're closing yourself off to the any sort of paranormal activity or experience or encounter you can have. And usually that's due to fear. And it, like, whether you let, if you're subconsciously scared of having an experience in a paranormal location, you're going to close yourself off to it because
Right.
spirits can sense that. And a lot of times, they really do try to be respectful, believe it or not. So you actively have to work on lowering your spiritual ego in order to have one of these things. So like you said, it's opening yourself up and trying to be safe about it So keeping your spiritual ego high in places like the Bell Witch Cave that are obviously very, very dangerous locations to explore and take stuff from. And then when you're going into a positive location like Hotel St. Pierre, really, really try, if you want to have an experience, try to lower that ego, try to open yourself up to it. My little advice for the week, I guess, but
Yeah, no, so I'm actually pulling something up because you just triggered a memory in
nice.
me that, and it was an episode of a show called Nephilim Death Squad. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Never heard of that.
But it's a gentleman named Austin Picard, who is on there, he's got some big podcasts. He does like true crime, and then he also is he does paranormal stuff too. But
Cool,
he was
okay.
talking about the Delphi murders. You've ever heard of this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've heard of those.
But he was saying that it's so often they'll go like, okay, so example, he went to the Eastern States Penitentiary in Pennsylvania, which is people after person after person after medium after psychic will tell you it's one of the most haunted places in the U.S. They rented his show rented out the whole place for
as you do
an entire night and did an investigation, but he had 2 skeptics with him, and they had nothing. Zero. Nothing happened.
And it's
nothing
because
happened
it's like
because they're not open to the idea of it happening. So literally what he's saying is that he's been doing this about 10 years or so, right? Maybe a little longer. He's like, every time I have somebody that's a skeptic with me, I don't experience hardly anything. So
because they're not opening themselves up to it. That's the thing with skepticism that I really, really try to remind myself, like, you can't do this job and be wholly skeptical because it gets to the point where it gets in the way of your objectivity. But when you go somewhere with like a skeptic and they're like, I believe it if something happens. Something could happen,
and
they won't
and
believe
then they'll
it.
make excuses for it, or they'll be like, "Oh, that could be this, blah blah blah," which it can. And I'm all about having a thing like a sheer streak of skepticism, but at the end of the day, things that happen, you know. And
I mean, like, I try to debunk things too, and I always will. But at some point when it's just like, I can't explain that. When a pot of boiling water, the water part of it catches on fire in my house, I'm sorry, I don't know how to explain that other than something otherworldly, something that goes beyond the laws of physics.
I mean, it's one thing to deal with sounds. Like, let's say you hear like, walking through a home or something. Could be a million things.
House settling.
Right. Or whatever excuse, whatever it is. You're standing there doing a Sasquatch, you're in a listening point, right? And you're listening. Forests are alive. There's just noises everywhere.
Right.
But and it doesn't mean just because you hear walking through the woods, it could be a deer, it could be a bear, it could be all kinds of stuff. But as soon as you hear that thing, whatever's there, yell, or like sound like a monkey literally in the woods, then you kind of have to shut that skeptic part off and be like, okay, I don't know what this is, but something's going on, right?
Remind me too, because I'm not the biggest believer, but if there's any cryptid that I'm ever going to believe in, it's either going to be Sasquatch or Mothman. I just think the stories are really interesting, but again, to sound very hypocritical, I'd like to see it for myself, but
of course, wouldn't we all?
Yeah, but that's the mystical part of it,
or whatever. But who the hell
knows?
I really don't even try and take pictures anymore. Like, I just don't, because every time I've tried, I can't tell you how many times I've had devices just energy drain.
Right.
And I mean, but that happens with paranormal experiences too. So I'm like, come on, man. So like, what am I dealing here with? Right. It's got to be something's going on. But
Yeah.
anyway, I mean, we can go down these rabbit holes continuously, and at the end of the day, it's just fun.
Hmm. And I think, I
It's
mean,
fun to
honestly,
get scared.
I'd rather live in a world where ghosts and monsters exist than live in a world where they
Yeah.
don't. So that's
Right.
why I'm
Right.
here.
But it also makes you realize too, like we don't have any of this figured out. And
Hmm.
at the end of the day, that we live in a pretty wonderful, amazing world and
Right.
universe, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Hmm.
Where this stuff happens.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. So, I guess you can look at it as a blessing, but so many people
See
just
it
want
as
to
a
stick
curse.
their head in the sand, literally, and live in ostrich land, which is fine.
It's fine. But
Everyone's, but
my question though, going back to the Bigfoot thing, what the sound that he makes or it or whatever makes in like the woods when it's like, because aren't they known to like watch people? Is it
oh yeah,
screaming
oh
or is
yeah.
it like knocking rocks or is it
Well,
both?
there's multiple. So
Okay.
you've got knocks,
Uh-huh.
um, which there's many theories. Now we obviously do knocks with sticks.
Mm-hmm.
I literally, but there's certain types of sticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we knock them together. But do I think Sasquatch is walking around with sticks in
No.
their hands?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't. So I think if you think about this, there's a couple theories. One of them is they can make the noise with their mouth,
Oh, okay. I've never heard that.
where it's kind of like we can cluck,
Mm-hmm.
like that. They're
Yeah.
just able to do it really loud.
Sure.
Or one of the other theories too is think about a mountain gorilla,
Mm-hmm.
and when they pop their chest,
Oh,
that
okay.
sound that it makes.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could just be them picking something up and knocking against a tree. You
That's
don't
the only
know.
one I've heard of was like they were doing like it's like a warning sound
Yeah,
where
they're what we call wood knocks,
okay.
and so because that's literally what it sounds like. It sounds like two. Do I have them down? I mean, I have two sticks that
Yeah.
and I can't remember what hardwood they're made out of, but it literally boom, clack, clack, and I've done it in my research area, and I get responses.
Oh,
So,
that's
I,
cool.
and I know it's not a person
Yeah.
because we're in the middle of a 95-acre tract where nobody lives.
Yeah. And also, why would another person just be out there
No one just
clicking?
decide,
You
oh,
know
I'm
what I
just
mean?
gonna clack or
I'm just
knock
gonna
or whatever. Yeah,
respond to
it's so
these
bizarre, right? So either way,
unless unless it's like another researcher,
yeah, but
but
it's not.
slim to none chance of that.
Correct.
Like,
So like there's that. But then they also make vocalizations. And you
yeah.
can go online and like look, especially like some of the best are what are called the Sierra sounds. And that'll
Ooh.
blow your mind.
Okay.
And it's from a gentleman's name. His name is Ron Moorhead, and
Okay.
he is a Sasquatch researcher, still is to this day. But
Sure.
these were done back in the 70s, so they were done with real like audio, like on tape, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, and they are pretty insane and intense. Like,
Yeah.
and he's communicating, like mimicking, and you can tell they get pissed.
Hmm.
There's some,
They're like,
so
stop copying me.
yeah, right. So check them out. They're the Sierra sounds.
Sierra sounds. Okay.
It's good. It's pretty
Awesome.
good. But
Yeah.
I've had a couple experiences where, well, the last one time I was in Pennsylvania, and I had a buddy with me who it was his first time out, and it literally sounded like chimpanzees fighting in the woods in
Which is
Pennsylvania.
not where
No,
they live
no, not
at
even
all.
close. Not even close. And that's literally what it sounded like. And other times we've had vocalizations that will, I, I, you can't even. It's kind of like what you were saying with the lightning.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, did that just happen?
Yeah.
And then you kind of like move on, right? You're like, because it's so
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like this, did I just hear that? And
Right.
literally, like I could feel it as much as I could hear it.
Right. And it's
Right?
like it's truly when you have like, and again, lightning is very different than the vocalizations of,
No, but it's
but
the same.
it's like you feel it in your bones, like it's like an electrical sort of charge. And
Right.
obviously it is with lightning, but like to your point, you have this like, I think that everybody has a bit of the shining, is what I call it. Just everybody has like this sort of knowing within them, some more than others. But like to your point, when you know, when you feel that sort of like this isn't right, it's
Yeah.
probably because it's not. Like it's
No,
probably
exactly.
something
Yeah.
else
I
beyond
mean,
what you're.
we're also electrical beings, right?
Mhm.
Beyond, I mean, if you want to get technical with it, we are all walking around with this toroidal field that our
Oh
body
yeah.
creates, right?
Yeah.
So especially with electricity, like the light, like that affects our heart, that affects everything.
Hmm.
I mean, if you
Well,
want to get like I mean, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole, obviously, but I mean, you totally could, especially even with like quantum stuff.
yeah.
Stuff
Oh, I
can
talk
get
about quantum
wild.
physics all the time on
Oh,
my show.
it gets
Like,
wild, right? And
mhm.
especially when you start doing that, you're talking portals and temporal. So, I mean,
Or like
go
even
down.
like we're living in like a matrix sort of
Oh,
situation, like
absolutely.
which
Like
I feel like we
ones
could
and
be, but
zeros, man. I
yeah.
mean, seriously, it.
And people say that too about paranormal activity or just like anything like UFO encounters, stuff like that. It's like there's this sort of like sticky electrical like feeling in the air when you are about to have an encounter more with like non-human humanoid beings. I feel like this comes up a lot when you're researching stories like that.
Yeah.
You have like there's a shift in like how reality feels, if that makes I have no other
Oh
way
no,
to
no,
describe
I
it.
totally understand what you mean.
So and it makes you they also there are theory and this to me is like very out there, but people think that Bigfoot could be like an extra dimensional being where
Oh
he
yeah,
like blips in and out. And
agreed.
that almost makes you wonder like
Yeah,
when we're having
I'm
those
not one
sort
of
of
these people that's in like a flesh and blood. Like there's
mm,
I don't, like there's two camps usually.
yeah.
There's the woo woo camp, right? And then there's the one where they're like, nope, this is a gigantopithecus that,
See,
it's a remnant hominid.
yeah.
And you know what? It's possible too,
Yeah,
for Christ's sakes. I mean, we literally there's things that we think have gone extinct that we find all the time,
sure.
and vice versa. Um, but who
But how does
cares?
it have the ability to like shift the electricity in a space? But also
Right.
like if I'm gonna believe in it, to backtrack what I just said, I also feel like it would more likely be the case that it's some sort of like species that has gone undiscovered or we thought was extinct.
Right.
Um, but I think it would be more fun if it could blip in and out of
Yeah,
reality. Or if
like
it
some
was like,
interdimensional type,
yeah,
entity, or has the ability well, so again, we're
we're
about to
rambling
run
now.
out of
So
time. But
sorry.
right, but it's like these things, you can get going on any of this.
Yeah. To
And
your
at the
point, we
end
know
of the day,
nothing.
we know nothing. And we all have theories, right?
Right.
Um, Especially when it comes to things like Bigfoot and paranormal. I mean, because we talk about the electrical part, we talk about whatever.
Hmm.
It's like you have different types of entities and different types of hauntings, different types of ghosts.
Hmm.
We have the ghosts that literally can mess with you, right?
Hmm.
But you also have those that just do the same thing over and over and
Yeah.
over again
Residual
on a loop.
hauntings.
So that says to me, a lot of this again, that's like imprinting on
Hmm.
space and time, right? And again, at the end of the day, we see this much. Again, my audience is probably so sick of me talking about this, but
I'm sure
we
they're
see
not.
this much of anything. This is
Right.
how much we see, right?
Hmm.
The spectrum's like this, and we see
Hmm.
about this much,
Right.
right? Of an actual spectrum, not even to bring in dimensions.
Right.
So at that point, what are we actually seeing? Are we seeing
there's-
something that phases from dimension to dimension? What's going on around us that we can't even see? Maybe they can't see us either. That's,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? So,
And then there are theories too with residual hauntings where it transcends
yes,
time as well as space. So it's like
correct.
the ghost that you're seeing in your house, who knows? The amount of times that I've gone through that apartment in the 2 years that we were living there and made the exact same cup of coffee. Who's to say that it wasn't just me at a different point in time and that residual energy is coming back to make a cup of coffee at exactly 9:30 in the morning, because that's usually the time that I make coffee.
Right.
You know what I
never
mean?
know. Yes,
So
I do. And
who
it's
knows?
all makes your head hurt.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting though.
Right.
It's so cool. I love it.
I do too. And it's one of those things like that's what this is all about, right? So yeah, we've been going about an hour and a half.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. I
It
love talking
was.
about this
It
kind of
is
stuff.
good. And obviously we can do it again, you know.
Sure. Yeah, and
we
I
give it
still
a
want to have you on my
Oh,
show
sure.
just to be able to.
Whenever, just let me know, or send me a link, whatever.
That sounds
Give me
good.
some dates and I'll give you, we'll do it.
Sounds great. I'm
And I'll
excited.
tell some stupid stories on there.
Can't wait. Let's do it.
So again, Courtney, tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So probably the best way to find me is on just my website. It's undergoing some updates at the moment, so it looks a little bare bones, I won't lie, but it's just hauntscast.com. You can find me on all of the socials using that link. And then I'm
Yep.
on any major podcasting platform. I also have a community Discord that we just launched. So if you're into chatting with people about this sort of stuff and want to be a part of a community, you can find that in my Instagram bio. That's at hauntscast, and you can click through and join. But really the best place to find me is probably just my website, because it has all the links to everything. And
Hauntscast.com. I'll put all these
Sure.
in the show notes. But yeah, like you're on Instagram, and then all the other places, all the other
major
all the
like
other things.
podcasting
Yeah.
on
Right.
stuff. I don't really understand how to use X, so just pay no attention to me there.
Well, it's kind of confusing anyway, but
Yeah.
either way, it doesn't work like the others.
It doesn't, but
So.
it's fine. I'm fine.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thanks so much for having me on. And
Absolutely. And we'll do it again before you
Of
know
course.
it. Seriously. So, yeah. So go ahead, check her out, guys and gals. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared. Hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe on my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way, cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they fill in the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free, but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading